public secondary schools are staring at a cash crisis following a prolonged delay in disbursement of Term 2 free education money. According to school heads we spoke to, services are hardly running as they should in schools, as the support staff have not been paid since May this year. Teachers employed by the Board of Management in public schools have also gone for months without pay, and suppliers are on the neck of school heads over accumulated debts. Last week, the Ministry of Education promised schools principals that the monies will be in the schools' bank accounts this week, but that has not happened. The Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers Union, KUPPET, is now threatening to rally secondary school heads to close the school down on Friday this week if the remaining 6 billion shillings for Term 2 is not disbursed before then. Now, this will greatly disrupt ongoing Term 2 examinations that the Form 4 students will use to gauge their preparedness for the national examination later in the year. Tonight in the program, of course, you're watching The Big Story right on KTN News. I shall be speaking to an education economist, Dr. Ferdinand Mbeche, who's with me in studio, and Dr. John Mugo, the country coordinator of Uwezo Kenya. But before I engage them, let's cross over live to our lead reporter, Sophia Onuna, who is gleaning information from the unions on the education cash crunch. Good evening, Sophia. And are we seeing a situation where we're going to see some sort of a financial crisis in secondary schools?
Good evening, Yusuf. That is the question. Many are concerned. Will this Friday, will Kenyans see schools close down earlier than expected because of what KUPPET has said is a reason being that there's no funding coming down to the schools and a lot of the programs being stalled. Of course, that would affect the education program. But tonight I'm with a man who's well-versed with the issues that are ongoing, who can shed more light on the same, the KUPPET Secretary General, Akelo Misori. Thank you, sir, for making time for us tonight. So, what is the issue? Break it down for us.
The issue is that the government has negated on the principle of the fact that they said that there is free, affordable secondary education funds. The disbursement has not been forthcoming, and that one has made many institutions to suffer a lot of irreparable losses because suppliers are on the neck of the school administrators, and the students are also now gone berserk. They are burning schools because there's a fatigue in the system, because the second term was relatively very long, and it had a lot of activities which were not fully funded, and the schools sourced these funds from other sources. And currently now, all the suppliers are on the necks of the principals of our schools. So this is the reason for which we said that in the absence of lack of accountability and commitment to facilitate the running of the schools, then there's no need for students to be in school with all this stress of the school.
So do we have specificity in as far as what kind of funding is lacking at this particular point? What monies have not been disbursed?
My sister, what you need to understand is that this term alone, the schools were expecting 30% of the overall funding schedule for the schools. And what happened is that the government disbursed only 13%. Now we are in the final 2 weeks of the school term, and then the school cannot manage to do this. You remember, currently many schools, even the day schools, are having feeding programs. There are also support staff who are supposed to be paid. And all these are all now a burden to the schools. So this one is what has caused the noise.
Yeah.
Yes.
So at this point, you're talking about school closure on Friday. What does that mean? Have you engaged the principals? Is there a plan that has already been put in place to ensure come Friday, it's all systems go? Or is it kind of communication you've had with the ministry but not trickled down to the schools as to see this actually happen as you have communicated?
Something very strange is that the communication has been from the principals to our officers, and we have also communicated the same to the cabinet secretary and the principal secretary. Nothing is coming from those ends, and we wonder what is happening. And my sister, what is currently obtaining in the Ministry of Education is a total disharmony in the operations, and you cannot imagine that even when you take your time to make a telephone call, now nobody answers. When you write letters, we have written letters, we have even come to the media, nobody answers our calls. You go to book appointment, nobody comes to respond to these calls. So everything is a process which we cannot understand. Yeah.
So, well, clearly the media is here now that we're having this conversation. But break it down for me. Come Thursday, or Friday rather, what is it we expect to see? Has the ministry said anything?
We have made it very clear, and it is upon the government to undertake their mandate very seriously. We have also instructed our members, who are also the principal schools, that in the absence of facilitation, there's no need for them to keep the boys and girls in schools. This will send them away. So this is our final instruction, that in the absence of funding, there's no need for schools to keep on running.
What are the critical...
With the attendant problem of having unrest all around us.
Well, you sound like you're trying to associate and link the numerous cases of unrest you've seen in schools around the country to the lack of funds trickling down. And yet, when we hear from the various schools, there's a variety of reasons. Is that an honest association of issues?
Very honest, so to speak, very honest. One thing which is there is that we are not only giving the explanation that the student unrest is due to lack of facilitation, especially the disbursement of funds, but that is a very key issue. Because in the absence of how to buy the basics to the institutions to run, there is all the challenge that there is somebody who is blaming somebody. And that is what we are saying. There are so many other issues. But one thing which is key, the fee payment in our school system, since the government pronouncement that they are going to take charge, is really very poor. And that's the reason for which we are saying that if the government sent the remaining 17% to schools, we will not be having all these problems in schools.
Yeah. So was it a wrong move, in your view, to have the government carry and take the burden of paying fees? Should it go back to the system we had before?
It would be very simplistic to say that the government had made a wrong move to commit that they are going to pay. For one thing, the Constitution has guaranteed freedoms, and the Constitution has also guaranteed that every child has got the right to education. This right must fall under some kind of obligation, be it parents or whoever has taken the responsibility. As it obtains currently, it is parents, the government has taken the responsibility of the parents, and therefore they need to chew the bullet. They need to bring the money. We have Parliament, which must take the government and the ministry to account. We have had promises that this money is forthcoming, and yet it does not come. Now tell me, this term has been relatively long, and the money which was supposed to go to do activity did not arrive in time, co-curricular activities. We are currently having national sports activity which is in Eldoret. And
so
this one was not properly funded at the grassroots. So the school sourced funds to finance all these processes.
So now, I hear you talking.
The events are over. At the sub-region and regional level,
right.
We are now at the nationals, and the money which was supposed to facilitate the whole process was not disbursed.
So I hear you talking about co-curricular activities, sir. In as far as the core function of education and whether that process is ongoing, you don't appear to have an issue with that. It's the core curricula and the extra functions around boarding and secondary schools that is arising as an issue. So is it that we need to separate issues here to actually say there is a problem, or is the whole system broken? Because we need to give and paint a clear picture, isn't it?
The whole system, as I've always stated earlier in this forum, is that the whole system has broken. And the ambassador, Amina, must take responsibility to give education its place in the economy of this country. If she's going to take the role of being an ambassador in an office of discussing diplomatic issues, and not on top of things, the way things are now, it is going to be a real disaster. We know how sensitive schools are. I've already indicated that if boarding schools are going to be part and parcel of the mandate of the teachers to run, then they must be facilitated in good time. It becomes so sensitive, because most of our schools, if you don't address the issue, which is a side issue in education like a boarding, then you have issues which you cannot contain.
But you have also said that perhaps it is time we delink the issues, that education on one hand, boarding is overtaken by, say, private business entities so that they're not issues mixed up, the government does not feel overburdened, and then that can be handled differently. Is that something you see that's feasible at this point?
Something which is very serious is to let us have a conversation around whether our schools have the capacity to sustain these two functions. We have schools which require a lot. For example, a school of about 1,800 students require that you have got a separate unit running the boarding itself. The teachers do not have the competencies to run boarding institutions, and that is the cause of a major cause of the unrest in schools currently. The schools which were established with the boarding component, where we have people who are doing the housekeeping, they are doing the laundry and so on, they have never had issues. One such kind of school is Kenya High in this country. It is having a fully fledged unit where the head of the institution does not have to supervise the boarding section of the school because it was established with such a structure in mind. But quite a number of schools, name it, we have had to contend with having schools. You have 3 schools running in one package, and which has caused a lot of trouble.
Okay.
Yes.
As we wind this up, I want you to paint a clear picture because there are parents watching this tonight at home and they'd want to figure out, does it mean come Friday they should go pick up their kids from school? What are you saying will be happening on Friday for a fact?
I'm saying the parents are also taxpayers in this nation. They should hold to account their elected representatives to take control and legislate appropriately what should obtain in our schools. And we need also to have a national conversation geared towards clear policy direction. As we talk currently, we have teachers who have to suffer consequences of mismanagement of school because their core function of a teacher in a school has been reduced to managing a kitchen, to managing a bedroom issue.
So let me re-ask my question. Yes. By Friday, do you have commitment from the teachers that they are closing down schools and students will be sent home?
I am announcing it here, that any school which shall remain functioning will be doing so at their own peril. We shall not take responsibility of representation in a manner in which somebody who is supposed to take responsibility, like government, has failed to disburse funds to school, and now the schools have become unmanageable. In the circumstance we are saying, the schools should close on Friday.
All right.
Yes.
Many thanks.
Thank you.
We thank you very much for your time. The Secretary General of the Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers with us tonight. He maintains Friday is the day they've given their members to shut down the school, saying it remains untenable at this point to continue operations. And those who continue to do so, then they will not stand to represent the same Yusuf. So that's where we find ourselves at this particular point. Of course, the story will continue to follow, but it will be interesting to hear what your other guests have to say about this subject.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Sophia Wanuna, for that. And it seems there's a serious communication breakdown between the union leaders and the Ministry of Education. But of course, it's a conversation that we're still going to probe even further in studio. I have Dr. Ferdinand Mbechu, an education economist. And joining me all the way from Kiambu Road is Dr. John Mugo, is the country coordinator, Uwezo Kenya. Good evening, gentlemen, and welcome to the program. And Dr. Ferdinand, if you could hear me, let me begin with you. Earlier in the month, we've seen the Education Principal Secretary, Belio Kipsang, promising, heads of schools that, money is going to be put in their bank account and they're going to continue running their schools. But up to now, we're yet to see that happen. Of course, I've talked to a couple of head teachers. We're going to run their soundbites shortly. But first of all, Dr. Ferdinand, let me begin with you. What are you reading in this? And is this going to affect the education system further?
I think it is very clear and very categorical what the Secretary General has indicated, that the lack of disbursement of those funds have actually made learning institutions ineffective and inefficient. One, we want to indicate that the required inputs in the education system without financial resources cannot be allocated. So that we are saying unless there is an immediate intervention to ensure that the remaining 17% is dispersed to the schools, then we are likely to find a crisis. And I need to emphasize that secondary school education is so significant in preparing these learners for the next level of education and training. And as we approach the next 2 weeks, they are supposed to be sitting for the examinations, which are supposed to measure the level at which they have been able to cover what was prescribed for this term. And if that money is not to be dispatched, then it means we are not likely to have to conduct examinations or actually efficient examinations. So we foresee a problem that must be addressed. It actually requires immediate attention. So
of course, many people are asking, where's the problem? Is it the Education Ministry? Is it the National Treasury? We're going to talk about that shortly. But let me bring in Dr. Mugu into this conversation. And Dr. from the statement I read earlier, the PS also added then that the reason as to why they failed to release these funds on time was occasioned by the late reading of budget statement then. But do you think that is still a valid reason? We still have about just 10 days before the schools close for second term.
Thank you, Yusuf. I think what is happening is pretty unfortunate. And what we are seeing is actually tension between Treasury and the Ministry of Education. Because we know that the way schools operate, that most of our schools are boarding schools. So the preparation for the 30% ought to have kicked off actually before the schools opened in April. Now, the disbursements of second term ought not be linked to budget reading because we know that the government's financial year begins on the 1st of July. But 1st of July is actually too late into the term because by then schools have already made most of the commitments that they have to make. So the excuse of the late reading of budget, I think that is not true because we know that the budget was always read around the 16th of June that week. So what happens now is that the synchronizing of the financial year of government and the disbursements that need to go to the first to schools in the second term, that really is causing a problem. So the budgetary cycle for the schools, for our schools is...
Dr. Mugo, hold on to that thought, but let me just take through our viewers some of how this capitation money is distributed. In the first term, it's supposed to be 50%, right? Second term, 30%, and third time, 20%. Now, at the moment, we are in second term, and these schools have received about 13% of the capitation money. So, Dr. Mugo, from your own experience in the education sector in this country, is this the first time that we're seeing this kind of a delay?
No, these delays, Yusuf, have been happening, and this is why we are very concerned in the education sector. We do not understand how you ask principals and head teachers of secondary schools to run without money when we know that most of these schools are boarding schools. These delays happened last year. That time there was a problem. There was a time even when schools closed before they had received most of the money of the disbursements of that term. One of the things we also know is that the ministry has done well in terms of capping school fees. So the margins that the principals and head teachers, especially of boarding schools, operate with are really thin. They are not supposed to make profit. They are not supposed to save money. And so it is now expected of government that when we say schools are opening, then the disbursement for that term also should be ready. So this is unfortunate because this time we know many things have been happening. So it was really not fair to be expecting principals and head teachers to be running schools without money. We know that schools are closing next week. So what one would ask is, how then have these schools been running? Is it that they have borrowed? And is that borrowing going to accrue interest? Are they going to be allowed facilities to borrow in the future, or what is really going to happen? So we would say we know there is a promise that the money was supposed actually to hit the accounts today.
Yes.
So I am hopeful that what Akello has described of closing schools this week will not happen if the schools receive the money tomorrow.
Dr. Mbeche, you've had Dr. Mugo there. This money were actually on paper supposed to hit the account of these schools by the beginning of this term. That did not happen. In terms of planning, how is this going to affect operations in schools?
Thank you for that question. I think when we talk about planning, we want to ensure that we have what it takes to conduct school activities at appropriate time, more effectively and more efficiently. What we are now noting is that the government has a very poor planning system in terms of allocation, distribution and disbursement of funds. Mm-hmm. So that particular planning gap is where the problem is. It could be that we have the money already, but the planning system is so poor such that we are not able to plan activities of the term. For example, in ideal situations, we should have this particular money dispersed in April so that the school principals can be able to adequately prepare for second term. Mm-hmm. So that we are able to have the required school inputs mm-hmm. at the appropriate time. So yes. When that is not done, and we have only 13% of second term funds dispersed, that implies we have a very poor planning system, mm-hmm. which will cost the quality of education that we are actually trying to work on. Yes.
And clearly there's a very huge deficit there of about 6.5 billion Kenya shillings that the, of course, Ministry of Education is yet to disburse to these secondary schools across the country. And of course, I've spoken to a couple of head teachers on condition of an own meeting. We're going to play their soundbite shortly. But first, we're going to take a very short break. But we'll continue with this discussion right on The Big Story. Of course, you're watching The Big Story right on KTN News. Stay there. We'll be right back.